Welcome, everyone, to the culmination of our series, both the Vinishma Fundamentals and the Vinishma Yamim Narayim. And to all of you who didn't even take either of those series who are here, welcome. We are so excited to have Dr. Leonard Carr with us. I posted his bio on the chats, so I want you to look at that. He has a long, long list of accomplishments as a Torah scholar and a psychologist. I want to talk about my personal gratitude and appreciation for Dr. Carr. We met about 15 years ago at an event where he was presiding over a sort of what was it, like a group therapy type of thing. And I was absolutely left speechless and blown away with the intelligence, the seichel hayashar, the clear thinking, the precision, laser beam precision to nail exactly what it was that was the issue and bring it into focus so quickly, so efficiently. Dr. Carr became my go-to for seichel hayashar, clear thinking, advice, sorting things out. You all know about Heshi, the secret weapon. Well, there's a few secret weapons. So Dr. Carr has been really such a huge benefit and asset to me in my life and my children's lives. And you are so fortunate now to be able to hear from him as he brings together so many things that we have learned about. So I hand the floor over to you, Dr. Carr. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Esther. I feel very honored that you included me in this program and very grateful to be part of this. So I'm not sure what everybody got, but I was saying that I'm really grateful and honored to be part of your program, Esther. And I think the Vinishma program is incredibly important and beneficial. And I think because what Esther and I have in common is maybe not really seeing a distinction between psychology and Torah, but really trying to find the MS of our human existence, which is an integration of spiritual and psychological. And as soon as one separates those two, one runs into problems. So I really would encourage people to promote this program because I think people have difficulty making Torah real in their lives. And I think that this is what Vinishma is about. And it's not just people making what I call Torah attainment, or people who take other philosophies and try and justify them through appropriating Torah. This is really about how to embody a Torah life. I've gone through the previous classes that you've had, and so everything I'm saying is built on them, and I'm hoping that you'll reference everything that's gone before as I go through what I'm going to go through, which is about Vatranus, and integrate in a practical way what you've covered in the previous classes. It's a very important starting point for me, and as I say this, I want you to listen to what I'm saying, not with only your seichel, but with your heart, with your nefesh, and with your body, with your guf. I want you to really feel in an embodied way the concepts that I'm talking about, because we really are talking about embodying these ideas. If you think about where we come from, the rabbis say that there's no happier days in a person's life than the days that were spent in the womb. And the womb is the prototype, our prototype of home. Our first home is the womb. And I want to just dwell on that, the meaning of that a little bit, because it's the backdrop to everything we experience in this world. If you think about the baby in the womb, first of all, the neshama comes from the world of shleimus, the world of wholeness, the world of perfection. The world where there's no lacking, where there's no change, the world of the eternal present. And the baby is floating in body temperature water, which means that the baby doesn't feel its skin. And if you don't feel your skin, there's a sense of boundlessness. And we're told that the baby sees from one end of the world to the other. an angel teaches the baby the entire Torah. The Torah represents shleimus. So again, the baby is connected to the shleimus of the physical world. The baby has no lacking, no chisaron. It has no needs. It has no discomfort, generally speaking. And so it lives in a state of perfection, a state of wholeness. And it's a completely protected, safe space. And then the baby is born. And birth is, in a sense, an expulsion. And it's an expulsion into an alien physical world. The neshama doesn't want to come into the physical world because the physical world is everything that is antithetical to the neshama. And so the baby cries at birth in protest to being forced into this physical existence. As it says in Perikavos, that we're born against our will, we die again, we leave this world against our will. And then we have a brush with death. We understand the fragility of life on an organismic level. Every living thing has some level of awareness of death, because that drives self-preservation. But it also drives our deepest fears, our deepest anxieties, and that anxiety we carry with us through our lives, and that guides a lot of our behavior, even, well, usually when we don't even realize it. And then through the way we raised, hopefully in the early years, particularly the first 2 years of life, we're taken care of in a way that mitigates that loss of home to a greater or lesser extent. And if we don't feel supported, if we don't feel that we've ever really had sufficient replacement of the recovery of that sense of home, we live in a state of exile, where we feel that the world is our enemy, it's us against life, and we're in a constant struggle with life. And if we recreate that sense of home, we go through life as a pilgrim. And I'm using this as a metaphor because these are the two choices we have. Because as we go through life, we build up our sense of home, be it our physical possessions, the people that we're attached to, our identity, our pursuits in life, our vocations, and all of those things give us a sense of home. But we also lose constantly. And that loss begins with the loss of the womb. It goes on to the loss of the breast, the loss of childhood. And in fact, every gain we have in life involves loss. For example, when you get married, you lose all the benefits of being single. When you have children, you lose the marriage that you had before you had children. So every step of life can be looked at through the lens of loss. And so our sense of home is constantly being compromised by losses. And then we're challenged to recreate that sense of home. And the transition from being an exile, or the choice from living as an exile to living as a pilgrim, is the choice to make our sense of home an inner sense of home, rather than relying on externalities for our sense of home. So the soul, born into a physical body, immediately experiences the separation from our true spiritual home. And this being thrust into this world filled with lack and imperfection and complexity leads to a tension between physicality and spirituality. And regardless of how much we try to replace that sense of home with physicality, our soul retains that longing to return to that space of spiritual wholeness. we're constantly feeling that longing, and often that longing manifests as a loneliness, as neediness, for example, in the mistaken belief that relationships can fulfill that need. But nothing in this physical world can fulfill that need, because it's a need to return to shlemus, to wholeness, to that ultimate spiritual source. And this moment manifests in moments of profound connection, of spiritual awakening or deep intimacy. Those moments remind the soul of its original shlemus, and it keeps awake in us that longing. And this longing has the potential to drive us to deeper self-awareness, and also to deeper outward connection with others and with Hashem. Reconnecting with this lost state of wholeness involves transitioning from survival mode to creative mode, nurturing ethical relationships, deepening our connection with Hashem. And of course, the more we're able to emulate Hashem's ways, the more we're able to embody Hashem's midas, what we understand Hashem to be in our human understanding, the more we're able to get closer to that oneness, that sense of security and belonging that our soul longs for. Excuse me, it's very dry in South Africa. So the spiritual soul born into a material world faces a dissonance between its original state of perfection and the imperfection of physical existence. We long for that connection to the transcendent, to the eternal. And this world demands constant adaptation, struggle, and survival. And oftentimes we get so caught in the struggle for survival and adaptation that we forget our soul's longing for its return, and in fact, our soul's inherent wholeness. In other words, when we feel that we are lacking, when we feel that we are broken or deficient or not enough or not good enough, we're really forgetting that in our essence, in our neshama, we are whole. We are part of that wholeness. And our coping mechanisms that we develop to manage life's demands often fragment our sense of self, leading to suffering. We get pulled into situations or into relationships or interactions where we betray our truth. We betray what we know deep down to be what's really important to us, what is really true to us, what is truly of value to us. And the more our attachment to the material world increases, the more we become disconnected from our spiritual essence. And as I said, this is survival mode. So our challenge in life is to reframe our relationship with the material world, seeing it as a vehicle for reconnecting with the soul's purpose and not in an end in itself, which is creative mode. And this is just paraphrasing what you've already learned, just for completeness of this talk. The material world often misleads individuals to misinterpret their yearning for wholeness as a need for something material. And the prototype of this was Chava. The Nachash convinced Chava that she was essentially lacking, which is amazing considering that in Garen she was living in a state of shleimus, and convinced her that Hashem's withheld from her what is essential to her wholeness, and that she could only attain that wholeness by misappropriating something outside of herself. Hashem had said, you may not eat from the tree, the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. And so it was actually a theft. And that is the prototype for the belief that our wholeness comes from something outside of ourselves. And also implicit in that is the knowledge that because Hashem has told us we're not going to get that legitimately, we have to somehow steal it illegitimately. We have to manipulate the world. And so what was the Nachash's trick in a way? What was the Nachash's strategy? To undermine Chava's emunah and betochen, that as soon as one believes that Hashem is withholding something from you, you automatically then you move into an adversarial relationship with Hashem and with life. And then you believe that it's little me against the world, and I have to manipulate the world to get what I need. And this mistaken belief drives the relentless pursuit of wealth, of physical pleasures, of external validation, kavod, taiva, kina, wanting what other people have, wanting what we don't have, thinking that the world has what we lack. And this can get people trapped into becoming totally enslaved in self-centered pursuits, believing that this is the way to survive, believing that being able to live on your own terms and have life on your own terms is the ultimate freedom, when in fact, it turns out that it's the ultimate slavery. Because not only can you never fill yourself from anything external, but you become enslaved to an illusion that is never going to offer any goods at the end, never going to fulfill its promise. So the more people are in survival mode, seeking validation or material gain or whatever they're seeking from the outside world, the more disconnected we become from our true selves. And so pursuing these external sources of wholeness or fulfillment leads to isolation and trapping us in a cycle of, as I said, perceived in freedom that is actually enslavement. And I think it's important to just dwell a little bit on the Yetzer Hara, because if one thinks about the Yetzer Hara as being the Satan, the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death, the Yetzer Hara and the Nachash in Adam and Chava, I think that for me, the relevance of the Yetzer Hara being the Malach HaMavos is that the goal of the Yetzer Hara is to thwart your potential, to get in the way of you being your best self, of putting all your goodness into the world. Death is the ultimate unreality, says the Maharal. And so when we are in the grips of the Yetzer Hara, we are in the grips of unreality, and we're in the grips of death in the sense that the Yetzer Hara will tell us that something is good for us, when in actual fact it's sabotaging us from being our best selves and from doing or being what we need to be in order to reach our state of wholeness. So the more we find ourselves caught in the gap between our authentic self and external reality, the more we try to control things, the more we try to work harder at getting life on our own terms, and this deepens our state of exile. So as a result, our relationships suffer, and I've seen it, in my practice, where, for example, people would rather lose a family member like a child, lose connection with a child, because they believe the child needs to apologize for something, or they get onto their high horse about something, or they destroy their marriage, or their job or whatever it is, they would rather lose something dear to them than back down, then adapt to other people's reality, then make a concession. And so when we're in the survival mode, we see others as competitors. And because they're competitors, we have to manipulate, we have to control. We have to come from a place of selfishness and survival instead of mutual respect, collaboration, cooperation, and care, which is harmony and shalom. And this fragmentation is caused by arrogance and self-interest. We could really say that all machlokas in life is the result of excessive devotion to self. As soon as you make yourself the center of your world, you put yourself in opposition to everybody else. And that is automatically a state of fragmentation of machlokas. And we forget that we are created b'tselem Elokim, which means that we have the potential to manifest divine qualities, and that we'll only really be our true selves when we're able to embody those divine qualities. So the quality of Vatranut, or Vatranus, is relinquishing personal desires, rights, or honor, and it allows us, it is the process, the choice, the active, proactive, intentional choice to transcend our ego. And this fosters spiritual growth and maturity. And it's about giving up the false illusions about how life should be and expecting the world and people and life to function on our terms and living in reality. Because reality, true reality, reality with a capital R, is a synonym for Hashem, because Hashem is the only reality. And so the closer we can get to reality, and of course, Torah is our bridge that helps us to see reality, that helps to, in a way, ground our lens, that distorts our reality, helps us to see the truth. And the more we live in reality, the closer we are to living in Hashem's reality. So when we live in Hashem's reality, our perspective becomes guided by an appreciation of the greater good. And when we appreciate the greater good, our actions become guided by the greater good. Our decisions become based on inclusivity, on what's good for everybody, not just for ourselves. So Vatranus brings freedom from the need for external validation or material gains. To be mevater means relinquishing the notion that my wholeness, my sense of self, my sense of worth, my well-being in this world is dependent on external conditions or on other people's behavior, or people treating me in a certain way or reacting to me in a certain way. And obviously, if you're able to embody this quality of Vatranus, you become a giver, because you realize that the well-being of the people around you and the well-being and the interests of the world is ultimately in your interest. That the more you're able to make your world and the world a better place, the better it is for you. And in actual fact, when you put yourself first and you operate at everybody else's expense, you're actually making the world a hostile place for yourself. And so when we become givers instead of beneficiaries, we move beyond ego and we align with a higher divine purpose. When I talk about Vatranus, people often say to me, but are you saying you have to be a doormat? And while I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to mevatel oneself, I think that to mevatel oneself, to nullify oneself, can be maybe a higher level of Vatranus. I don't think that's expected from people generally. But in actual fact, it's important to realize that the power of Vatranus comes from the quality of Malchus, from sovereignty, because Hashem is the ultimate giver. Hashem needs nothing from us. Hashem only gives. And so the more we're able to say, I don't need something or external conditions for my sense of well-being and wholeness, the more one is engaging that Malchus and saying, I can give without losing anything. And in fact, I gain by giving. And taking or demanding or needing is not going to make me whole or fulfill me in any way. Malchus says, I don't need that. I need to get beyond myself. I need to find my power through giving, through relinquishing, through not being dependent and enslaved to needs and fantasies of control and how the world should treat me in order to become whole. And so through Vatranus, we cultivate psychological and spiritual maturity. We empower ourselves to respond to life with generosity of spirit and to become more transcendent and inclusive in our view of reality. Through Vatranus, we return to our spiritual home and we restore the peace and belonging that our souls long for. So Vatranus is foundational to becoming your best self through living in creator mode. It fosters a sense of inner wholeness and maturity, allowing individuals to embrace life from a higher perspective. It encourages the recognition that the greater good is really where your attention should be, and that through that, you become aware and you live with an awareness of the interconnectedness of all life, of the shleimus of creation. Excuse me, I'm really sorry about my dry mouth. So Vatranus is based on what we could call an abundance mentality. It's based on imunin betochon, on being samer b'chelko, on knowing that whatever Hashem has given you is what is good for you, and that applies to the resources and the benefits and all the goodness that Hashem has given you, but also what you lack. Because if you think about it through the perspective of child development, a child grows through lacking. A child develops through where the caretakers fail the child. Assuming there's sufficient love and security, obviously. But where there's sufficient love and security and support, and the child feels held and protected, it's in the failures that the child has to draw on its own resources to become better, stronger, more resilient, wiser, bigger. And so Vatranus cultivates this abundance mentality, but it also creates more reverence for others' dignity and value. So obviously, to practice Vatranus, to really be able to master Vatranus, we have to fully trust in Hashem's plan and acceptance that the world from our perspective is imperfect and our control is limited and often illusory. And we have to understand that even though we can't see Hashem's mind, we can't see Hashem's reality, that ultimately he is guiding the process of our lives and the unfolding of history in our world. And when we are able to embrace this, we are able to let go of our need to control outcomes. And instead of trying to control outcomes, we can focus instead on supporting each other's growth and well-being. And when we do this, we align with the natural flow of life and with Hashem's perfect justice, because we don't have to keep the cheshbon on Hashem's behalf. We don't have to hold on to faribbles and grudges and all the things, unfinished business, resentments, because we're aware that Hashem is controlling the world, and it's not up to us to be the investigating officer, the prosecutor, the judge of everybody else. And as I mentioned earlier, it shifts our mentality from scarcity to abundance, and this leads to contentment with both material and personal aspects of life, because whether one experiences life as supportive and abundant or threatening and scarce, withholding, is really about where one places one's attention, whether you're constantly focusing and obsessing on what's missing and on unreality, or you're focusing with an Ein Tov and a Lev Tov. You're looking at the goodness of life, you're looking at what you appreciate of life. And through that, you feel Hashem's support, and you realize Hashem's constant presence and taking care of the world. So Vatranus embodies godly traits like kindness, humility, patience, forbearance, tolerance, clemency, forgiveness, compassion, and mercy. Central to Vatranus is the development of sneers. And by sneers, I mean internality and containment, being a contained person, knowing what is private and what needs to be kept internally and what needs to be shown. Because through that quality, you hold back, you don't react to things immediately, you process your experience, you delve deeply and investigate your experience thoughtfully and your emotions, and you decide in a conscious way what the appropriate action would be, how much to show of what you've processed and how much to hold back on. And in doing that, you're able to calculate the costs and benefits of actions. And that is the costs and benefits to your personal growth, to your relationships, and to the well-being of others before you respond. Tshuva provides that path back to wholeness. And this goes beyond seeking forgiveness. It involves returning to one's true self, to that home that we were talking about, repairing relationships and restoring the relationship with Hashem, recreating our sense of home in the world by getting rid of unfinished business and all the things that made our sense of being at home compromised. Tshuva restores the bonds of connection and wholeness and allows us to live in peace and a sense of belonging. So Vatranus is yielding control, and this leads to true sovereignty and aligning to Hashem's will. It frees individuals from self-centeredness and material concerns to true spiritual growth. It facilitates that journey from spiritual exile to peace, harmony, and connection with Hashem. Human beings are unique in their capacity for choice. No animal has a choice. And not only do we have a choice, we have an awareness of that we have choice. We have an awareness of what those choices are and the ability to weigh the options that go beyond immediate self-interest. An animal can only act instinctively and in self-interest. We possess the unique ability to pause between stimulus and response, and to choose our actions consciously, to exercise restraint. And this allows us to rise above the ego and act with nobility and spiritual maturity. So I want to go into the practicalities of Vatranus. And Vatranus manifests in tolerance and patience. It involves making sacrifices for the greater good and fostering peace. True sovereignty is achieved through self-sufficiency. And when you can make sacrifices without resentment and prioritize the well-being of others or the collective well-being over personal gain, you're really exercising your sovereignty. And this requires an inner strength and a courage that allows one to become completely free of external validation. Vatranus stems from and encourages generosity of spirit and practical generosity, sharing resources, being able to concede in conflicts, prioritizing fairness and the well-being of the community. It fosters a mindset of compromise and collaboration, ensuring harmony and balance in relationships and society. Vatranus requires very often going beyond the letter of the law, reflecting a broader divine perspective. And this includes giving others indulgences, not being so den-orientated. For example, a waiter doesn't give you such good service in a restaurant. Many would say they didn't give good service, I'm not giving a tip. But if the person is really depending on that money, being able to say, well, it's okay, they need the money, I can let go of the fact that they didn't give good service. That is giving an indulgence. Forgiving, not letting the past define your future. Moving forward without letting past events shape future or current decisions. People make the mistake of believing that behavior is driven by the past. Behavior is actually driven by the future because you don't live backwards. You always act with intention. So when people say, I won't do something because of something someone did to me in the past, really what they're saying is, I'm using the past as an excuse not to take responsibility for the relationship or the possibilities of the future. And so by letting go of the past, by being mavater of whatever happened in the past, you free yourself from creating the circumstances and the relationships that you really want. It requires detaching yourself from midas like gaiva, pride, the need for kavod. When we over-identify with our ego and we think that our ego, which is really our imagination, is who we really are. So being able to forgo personal honor, backing down in an argument, developing anova, humility, being self-effacing, allowing others to take the limelight, giving others the limelight, not asserting entitlements, but making allowances for others' needs and perspectives. You can see from these examples that every single day there are countless moments when this quality of Vatranus becomes the key challenge. Yielding and making concessions, prioritizing others' wishes, acknowledging their reality without needing to assert one's own reality, exercising forbearance, patience, self-restraint, just like Hashem, Erech Apayim, letting go of expectations, waiving preferences, accepting outcomes with grace, practicing forgiveness and clemency and offering pardon without resentment, restoring harmony through conciliation, apology, giving others the benefit of the doubt, helping others save face, and offering dignified ways for people to make amends after mistakes. It's what I call helping people to find a way back. Sometimes people are embarrassed or ashamed and won't reach out. To be mavata is to take the initiative and to make it easy for them. Vatranus calls for intellectually, emotional, and physical letting go, surrender, moving from survival to creative mode. And this shift acknowledges the wholeness, and that wholeness and security lie in Hashem's care. And we release our need for control and embrace trust in divine providence. I think I have to stop there because we wanted to to make time for questions. And so we'll open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Carr, for such a accurate, precise presentation about what our challenge is and how to face it. Okay, let me, here we go. Here's everybody. You guys can raise your hands if you have practical questions. Okay, and Dr. Carr I'll call on you. And where did Dr. Carr just go in my screen here? That's so odd. I will call on you and you would be able to raise your hand. But what just happened? Hold on. Second. Yeah, there's Dr. Carr. 1 second. Okay, let me wait. I have to do this. Do not unmute yourselves, guys, unless I unmute you, okay? All right, here we go. Devora Seidel, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Carr. I'm a landsman, but I'm been in America for a long 40, 50 years. I have a question for you. Isn't it appropriate that if somebody displays certain patterns of behavior, let's say you have to have somebody in your home who steals, so isn't it appropriate that their past behavior has shown these patterns? Therefore, you can say, okay, I need to lock my cupboards or whatever to protect myself for the future. Because Dr. Carr said that, the future defines the present, not the past.
Oh, wait,
I can't hear, sorry.
That's odd. 1 second. Why? Yeah, go ahead.
So being Mavater doesn't mean being a nobody. And I think that it's the exact opposite that I want to stress, that being Mavater is about human dignity. It's about sovereignty. It's not about allowing yourself to be walked on. And so it's completely different. What you're talking about is an example where if you have someone in your house who steals, by allowing them to do that is not good for you, but it's also not good for them either. You're not doing them any favor, So reality is, I'll give you another synonym for reality. Another synonym for reality is boundaries. The Torah is actually about boundaries. And if you think about it, we inaugurate the week with Havdalah. We are Mavdil, Ben Kodesh L'chol. The davening begins with Asher Nasan L'tzech Rivina L'Avchin Ben Yom U'Vein Laila. The whole of Torah is about making distinctions. And that's distinctions between right and wrong, appropriate and inappropriate. And being Mavater is a midah of being Mavater one's own ego, in a sense, your pride, whatever it is. But it's not being Mavater on right and wrong. That's not your prerogative. We have to be guardians of right and wrong. That is our obligation from a Torah perspective. But obviously, in being guardians of right and wrong, being Mavater means doing it without ego, without getting on a high horse, without making demands for one's personal kavod, for example.
Right.
Thank you.
Sorry, somebody asked the same thing. The question is, what if someone else is in survival mode? And I think you answered that. 1 second. Okay, go ahead, Miriam Ben-Gigi, go for it.
Hi. So I understand the concept of Vatranus that you were saying. We only have disappointments in life because we're arrogant and we want certain outcomes, and if they don't happen or it's not the way that things we expected, to turn out a certain way and it didn't, so then we're upset. But what's the balance? Because I'm thinking about, let's say, taking the concept of Vatranus to the fullest, the highest form of that. would probably take away someone's drive to just accomplish. Because if you're happy and complete the way you are and you know you're within Hashem, then why would you want to accomplish anything? So like, what's the balance between the two?
Right, but it's not about, it's a good question. And you can see from that perspective, from the perspective of your question, you can see how the Yetzer Hara is a gift, and the Nachash was a gift. Because without a Yetzer Hara, exactly what you're saying, we'd be nobodies. We'd be lying on the streets, you know. But the issue is really leveraging those qualities of ambition, of drive, of competitiveness, leveraging them to do good in the world, to do what is right, and to make sure that our ambition is ultimately the goal of our ambition is to serve Hashem and to do what's right, and not to serve ourselves. And that's really the distinction. It's this, all the qualities that come from the Yetzer Hara are qualities that drive us to build the world. We wouldn't build a world without those qualities. But we have to understand that our goal is to subjugate ourselves to the will of Hashem, and not to make ourselves the God in us, the false God in a sense, that we are serving.
So could you give like an example of how that would play out?
Well, could you give me an example of where you would see the dilemma? Because I'm not sure how it connects with Vatranus.
Right, like let's say like Vatranus means like I'm whole, right? I have everything I need in my reality. Like this is, let's say, the best place for me to grow, like being happy with your reality. Where
But I'm glad you're raising that, because your whole, our wholeness is intrinsic. We don't feel it though. That's the point. We have to know that we are whole intrinsically, because our neshama is whole and comes from a place of wholeness. But our experience of the physical world is a world full of chisronos and full of disappointments and full of frustration and pain. And the issue is, how do we use that, those everything that is lacking, all those things that are painful and difficult for us, how do we use them for our growth and as catalysts for our service of Hashem, as opposed to becoming self-centered and stuck in them, where we believe that the purpose of our chisronos is to make sure that we get our own way and that we get benefit for ourselves, and we exploit the world, you know, for our own interests.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it. Thanks so much.
Somebody asked on the chat, does ambition come from an inner drive and not from trying to be externally successful? Which I think you also basically.
Yeah, it definitely comes from the Yetzer Hara, but as I said, one has to sanctify it and use it for good. And it comes from both internal and external, because it's competitive and all of that, but one's got to use it as a vehicle and not as an end in itself.
And complacency with your, I mean, Vatranus doesn't mean complacency in your immediate situation, and like,
Absolutely not.
Gittel, go ahead. Gittel Mares. Gittel, you there? Can you unmute yourself? What happened to Gittel?
Yeah, Gittel's not muted, but I can't hear her. I think maybe the microphone volume needs to be turned up.
Hold on one second. Gittel, could you unmute yourself? I don't even see her. Hold on.
She's not muted.
I don't know.
It's just microphone volume.
Okay, I'm
Now?
gonna come back. Are you
Yeah,
there?
that's good.
Can you
Okay.
hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
something plugged in there. Sorry. First of all, thank you. That was great. It was great. You talk about moving forward is you let go of the past in order to be able to move forward. But if I'm like totally honest with myself, hurt is real. And to move forward and to kind of ignore that hurt or let go of that hurt, I'm not really sure how you're supposed to honestly let go of the hurt and move on when it has impacted you. How do you let go of hurt?
Well, these kinds of questions are obviously difficult to answer without context. I don't expect you to provide context. I'm just preempting my answer. I think the general principle for me would be what I said earlier, that behavior is driven by the future, not the past. And so you've got to look at how the hurt is serving you. For one thing, hurt reminds a person of the danger that, maybe this relationship's dangerous or that you could get hurt again. But that doesn't mean that you have to hold on to the hurt. It would mean you have to set boundaries in the relationship. And so you have to honor the hurt in the sense that it's telling you something, it's giving you valuable information, but you can't allow the hurt to become what rules your life and affects your choices. So you've got to work out how, obviously how to prevent yourself from being subjected to further hurt. But if you hold on to the hurt, you've got to consider that it's holding you back in many ways in your life, because it means that you're going to close yourself off to, other relationships. You're going to be in a constant state of self-protection. And that's going to limit your possibilities in other spheres of your life.
So when we talk about letting go of hurt, letting go means responding to it in a healthy way. But the hurt, like I haven't discovered a way of letting it go as much as I would like to, let's say. But when we say letting go of hurt, do we mean that we just respond to it in a healthy way and we don't let it define our actions?
Yes, but also you've got to change your relationship with the hurt. So I'm just going to give you a suggestion, is that you imagine that hurt as a little girl, and you allow that little girl to tell you the whole story about that hurt. And you listen to all the nuances and all the issues in that story. And then, like you were talking to your own child, you give an answer that would help to validate and also to heal that hurt, and also share your wisdom as how that little girl needs to respond to the hurt. So in any painful emotion is best dealt with in a loving way, and that might sound a bit crazy, but actually most people turn on themselves for their painful emotions. Most people feel ashamed or embarrassed about their painful emotions or critical of themselves. And when you do that, those feelings will never go away. But just like you would react to a child, not with criticism or judgment or rejection, you'd respond to a child with rachamim, with love, with understanding. You've got to try and connect with the pain through that part of you.
So there's like an acceptance, and then it can go.
Yeah, it's more than an acceptance, it's a deep understanding and validation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sabina. Sabina, you there? Okay, we'll come back to you. You can raise your hand again if Perla.
Hi, thank you so much for this class. I appreciate it very much. I very much appreciated when you explained that Vatranus comes from sovereignty, Malthus, because I struggle with both the concept of teaching our spirituality and Vatranus in the framework of child development. And I don't want to talk for everyone else, but for myself, I'm wondering if there is danger in teaching it too early.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you raised that. There's tremendous danger in teaching it too early, because to engage your malchus, you have to have a strong sense of self. And when if you try and teach Vatranus to a child, to someone who is still developing a sense of self, you're really teaching them to be a nobody, to be a nothing. And you know, this would be a typical case where you'd see this, and where one does see this, even though people might not name it, is, for example, with older children. You know, when you're constantly telling an oldest child that they have to concede all their rights and not get upset and whatever it is for the sake of younger children, you know. So really, you can teach it in small ways, and we certainly teach children to share, to concede, to apologize, to forgive. We teach those elements, but to be mavata, where you're saying, you know, I don't need my toy right now, I'll just let anyone who wants to take it, take it. You're depriving the child of developing a sense of self. Preschool children, toddlers, and I'm not saying this is a joke, I mean this literally, toddlers are already psychopathic narcissists, you know. And the goal of child rearing, and I mean, this is a whole talk on its own, but actually everything you understand about child rearing, we need to apply to ourselves to bring ourselves up spiritually. And so the purpose of child rearing is really to take a child from that completely self-referenced, self-centered perspective to being able to perceive and respond to a world beyond the self. But it starts with developing that sense of self, and you know, and that balance is a very fine balance to get.
Do you have any advice for, sorry, do you have any advice for when the damage is done and when the messages came too strong too early, so they damage the sense of self?
How old is the person we're talking about?
Adult.
Right.
Both. But I
right.
would say
So
issue, a universal issue.
So obviously the best way to fix something is to really go to the other extreme. Now, that obviously in practical terms, you can't always do that. I mean, you can't go, you know, to become completely narcissistic and selfish, but you could definitely become, you could think internally, what would a narcissistic self-centered response be? And at least acknowledge that, grant yourself that possibility, and then decide how you want to respond. And that's really being mavata, because you're giving yourself the choice to being completely self-centered. And then you're not just doing your knee-jerk, well-practiced reaction of not having a self. You've, you know, put a stake in the ground, but then you're making a choice. But the other thing is, and I'll say this as a general rule, and it's something that I learned from my late father-in-law, who was my Rebbe, and it came from an unexpected comment, because someone asked him, his name was Rabbi Goldfein, someone asked him if he said, Rabbi Goldfein, are you not being makil in this situation are you not being mekil in kashrus? And he said, no, I'm not being mekil in kashrus, I'm being machmir in shalom. And I learned a tremendous lesson from that psychologically, that any midah that you're machmir on, that you're strict about, you're going to be lenient in something else. If you machmir in din, you're going to be lenient in chesed. If you machmir in chesed, you're going to be lenient in din. And so one's always got to look at where is that balance? Where is that, diaka? Where is that tiferes? Where you're finding the balance? But also, and this is actually the message, you always have to make sure that you are an equal beneficiary to whatever you're offering anybody else. So if you're doing chesed, you always run the risk, if you're too machmir on chesed, you could be very cruel to yourself in the process. And so if you say, I need to do as, I'm equally entitled to be a beneficiary of my chesed as that person, then you've got a conflict of interest. Then you have to find the balance between doing chesed to yourself and doing chesed to them. And there you find the appropriate boundary.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ilana, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Carr. That was incredible. And my hands sore from writing. Thank you. So my question is, there was a question that came a little earlier about the pain and when others inflict pain on you and you have to be mavata. So my question is, we know that the self is very important because Hashem, like we know, we have to love ourselves before we can love anyone else, right? We have to just not be self-centered, but we do have to have self-preservation.
Right.
So there's a balance there that needs. So do you think maybe distance would help in that situation where you wouldn't be operating from a place of anger or hatred or any negative emotion, but you gave yourself the space because some things and some people are not good for you?
Absolutely. So I believe, first of all, being Mavater doesn't mean that you shouldn't give someone tochacha, that you shouldn't give them feedback. Having said that, and that's why I brought in the issue of sneers, and I think that one should only enter into a conversation about hurt or something contentious when you have processed it yourself, when you're not coming from a place of reactivity, and when you can do it in a calm and respectful way. But if you're dealing with someone who cannot or will not take feedback, to put it bluntly, someone who's narcissistic, you don't really have a choice but to keep distance. Obviously the ideal is to be able to give the person the feedback. It's a mitzvah to give the person the feedback and to give the opportunity to make amends and to fix it. Obviously the ultimate goal is shalom, but there's some people who are unable to create or to live in a world of shalom because they're so self-centered that they can't get out of seeing everybody else as a competitor.
Their vessel,
people like that you can't talk to.
Right, because their vessel is closed.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Michal. Michal, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Carr. This was phenomenal. So I think you may have just answered my questions. Let me just reword it a little bit. One is, if a person has taken care of their own hurt, is there ever a time to, so I guess that would go in, there is a time to ask somebody to have apology in order, that would be more like for tohacha, that would be for the other person's gain, but not that a person should need any apology, but just for the other person's sake, to show, to guard between right and wrong. Like, I don't know.
Right, absolutely. Well, first of all, I think that I think one's got to be careful not to hear me say you got to lose all sense of self. So, I mean, I think it's even okay to want an apology, because as human beings, the apology helps us to let go of the pain or the resentment or whatever it is. If the person's not going to give it to you, or they don't get the point, then you can be mavater and say, okay, I can let this go because they're unable to give it to me. But I think that one's always got to bear in mind that the ultimate goal of all our actions, the reason that we were created, says the Rambam, is to create shalom in the world. The Torah was given to us for shalom, and this is all about shalom. And because shalom is the highest value, it means that there's really almost no sacrifice that isn't worth it for the sake of shalom. But having said that, that depends on everybody's ability. I mean, we're not, well, I'm certainly, nowhere near being like the tzaddikim. And I don't think we can always expect that of ourselves, but one has to always keep in mind that our decisions have to be informed by what will create shalom, peace, harmony, achdus, unity, and that gives really the higher purpose to Vatranus. Vatranus is really about keeping shalom, and so often, and this is especially in close family relations, especially in marriage. There's so many times when you've got to say, yeah, I know this is an issue. I do have a valid point. This is extremely irritating, but is it worth sacrificing shalom for this? Because the cost of sacrificing shalom is very, very high.
Right. So if, let's say, things were like a person, I don't know, between somebody else, whatever, like things were okay presently, but they have memories of the past, and they can work on that and not, and get over it or not be hurt or whatever, but they still feel just like a person, they need to lahavdil. But we know with Hashem, like, even though we've gone past our misdeeds, but we still need to confess. That's part of tshuva. That's a mitzvah.
Absolutely.
So can a person kind of like want that from the other person? Like, hey, you're okay now, but what about this? Like, and sort of want that apology for themselves, for the other person too.
Right. So can we make a distinction between wanting and demanding? Because it is, in fact, if anyone's interested, we can do this through Esther. I've written articles. I actually wrote an article for the Jerusalem Post on actually using the process of tshuva to heal ruptured relationships. And I think that it is about making amends, apologizing, acknowledging the other person's realities. These are the way we help each other to heal from hurt, and we restore the integrity of the relationship. So I just want to emphasize that Vatranus is really about when the other person's not able or not willing. Vatranus doesn't get in the way of everything we know to be normal, healthy human behavior, which includes giving each other the chance to grow, and to live in reality, because, I mean, often someone confronts one with something. For me, for example, children. if they confront me with something that I did to upset them or hurt them or whatever it is, I'm extremely grateful, because I would hate to think that, especially if it was a misinterpretation. But I'd hate, that distance to come into the relationship, because that hurts, and unfinished business create distance in the relationship, just like in our relationship with Hashem. And if you want closeness, and if you want authentic relationships, people have to be able to be honest with each other. And that means that there have to be processes that help people restore things when hurts and breakdowns happen. And tshuva is very much one of those processes that we can, the exact formula of tshuva we can apply in our personal relationships. And I very often do, when I'm doing couples therapy, people don't understand why an apology is not enough. I'll give an example, where a person's betrayed the relationship in some way, and they apologize sincerely, but then they still show certain characteristics that are reminiscent of the exact qualities that caused them to do the hurtful thing in the first place. Then you can't expect the other person to completely trust them or forgive them. Just like in our relationship with Hashem, you want to see that that person's no longer the person that they were when they made that mistake. Everything in our relation with Hashem and human relationships are analogies for each other.
Okay, thank you. So the word you use, unfinished business, creates what in relationships? What word did you use?
Well, distance, alienation.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Eileen.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. Very, very beautiful. You made me smile because I just named a parrot that I found Shalom. So thank you for that. Fabulous. Okay. I just want to review and ask a simple question, and I'll be quick. You said serve Hashem and not serve ourselves. And that's a bingo. I get it. It really is the ultimate you before me. And Hashem always leads that way. So it totally makes sense in my brain. So if that's the goal, what is your tip on, as we work toward that goal, sometimes we're human, so we have our deficits. What is your tip on centering ourselves to get to that place?
Can you just elaborate on what you mean by censoring yourself?
No, not censoring, centering.
Oh, centering. Oh.
What is a tip on getting there? Because that is the ultimate goal, but we each
that's actually a really important question.
Okay.
Because being centered, what does being centered mean? Being centered means grounded in our bodies, right?
Of course.
When you are only in either your intellect, your seichel, or your emotions, or your body, you're going to act in destructive ways, right? Mm-hmm. And so when a person's making a decision, you can be so in your head that you don't realize that that decision is actually being driven by revenge, or it's being driven by jealousy, or whatever it is. So why I think that being contained, being tsanua, is so important is because when you hold back, when you restrain yourself, when you slow things down, when you increase the gap between stimulus and response, when you center yourself through your breath, I work a lot with the body, and breathing is you cannot be centered if you're not breathing properly. And if you're not actually in touch with the sensations and emotions and everything that's going on in your body, and when you bring your thoughts, feelings, and sensations and intuition together in the same place at the same time, because they're usually all over the place, in different places, traveling at different speeds. When you bring them all together, you're able to grasp the fuller reality and to get a sense of what's driving you. What is the truth? What is the other person's reality? What are the possibilities of where they're coming from? And in what way is this about me? Because the more you understand what your hot buttons are, the more you're able to discern, yes, this feels very real to me, but I also know that this is one of my hot buttons. So let me take more time to think about it and to consider whether the person really meant what they meant, whether I interpreted it correctly. And this is where things like a quality like Danakavskus, giving the benefit of the doubt, is based on the understanding that you don't know the full reality. You don't know as much as you think you've understood it, you haven't understood it. And so it's opening the possibility for the other person to come with different motives, different interpretations. And in that way, you're opening the possibility for reconciliation and also for you to grow in your understanding and compassion and empathy. You know, so centering is the key to all of this.
So centering ourselves with a keen awareness of what's driving everything and taking that breath, slow down.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Thank you very much for a wonderful, wonderful source of information and lecture.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Perry.
Hi, thank you very much. I really loved that last answer. I hope I wrote it all down. Okay, my question is something that I think that when I listened to your class today, I understood from you that not having Vatranus and having a very self-centered view of the world is not always caused by true narcissism, but rather by bad midos. Am I understanding that correctly? Because I've been blaming somebody who I have to relate with all the time that she's narcissistic, but I'm beginning to see that not really. Maybe it's really just such a big sense of self that's gone overboard. So my question to you is, how can we tell the difference? Like, at which point does bad midos end and does true narcissism start?
Right. So I don't know if you noticed, but when I use the word narcissism, I shuddered a little bit. And I do my absolute utmost to not talk in any psychological language. So the thing is that we were talking about narcissism earlier, actually, when we were talking about ambition. There is healthy narcissism. Healthy narcissism is a healthy sense of self. And healthy narcissism is what gets us to groom, to take care of our interests, to have ambition, you know, to have some concern about our image. So in a healthy person, obviously some people have, in every meta, some people have it more strongly and some people have it more, you know, mildly. And unfortunately, these terms, because they become so much part of popular culture, there's an overuse of them. And so narcissism's got a bad name because we all need a little bit of narcissism to, you know, to get through life. The problem is when it becomes exaggerated. And Vatranus itself actually is a meta that I think is taught, and you know, people either get it through their upbringing or they don't. So I don't think someone who's not able to be Mavata is necessarily a sign of anything sort of unhealthy or pathological. You know, it's pathological when, you know, in a true narcissist, where the person is totally unable to back down on anything, or yield or concede. And usually in that sense, they even see compassion and chesed as weakness, you know, but that's obviously extremely unhealthy. So I think that giving the benefit of the doubt is really what you've just done. And that's, and I think we should all do that, and which I think Hashem does with us too, is to say that actually if you made a mistake, it was out of ignorance and not out of the will to, you know, to hurt somebody.
Okay, but in real life, when dealing with this person, can I push back? Can I reprimand? Can I set boundaries? At what point do I know I can or I can't?
No, those are all different things.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah.
1 second, Dr. Carr, 1 second. I have my little granddaughter's birthday party that started an hour and a half ago that I want to catch you in.
That's terrible.
1 second, I'm going to make you the host. When you're done with the last few questions, okay, just in the meeting, thank you so much. It was so enlightening. You pulled it all together. The questions are fabulous, so clarifying, and we should collaborate in the future. And everybody who's listening, you can personally reach out to Dr. Carr, reach out to me for his information, or just Google Dr. Carr, Leonard Carr, and we should have a Ksivach Simatov, everyone. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther. Enjoy the party.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye, everyone.
Your granddaughter.
So you were saying, so setting boundaries is different. The first, we're talking about pushing back. That just sounds like the opposite of being mavater. Do you know what I mean? So yes, you do have to set healthy boundaries, but pushing back sounds like you want to in some way dominate, or, you know, or get the advantage over them. I'm not saying it is, it just sounds like it.
Okay, so no, I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is, this person basically feels that they are the only one that counts and nobody else has a right to an existence of their own self.
Right.
So pushing back would mean, no, this doesn't work for me, and I'm really sorry you feel that way. It's just making sure that my sense of self can still continue to exist.
Absolutely. So what I would say is that you can assert your sense of self without telling them. In other words, you don't have to announce it to them. So for example, if they make a demand on you, you could just say, you know, sorry, I've got other arrangements, or I want something else. And just say what you want and what you need without making it a confrontation. You know what I'm saying? Without reacting to them.
Not then that I'm wondering if I'm actually dealing with somebody that's truly narcissistic, because they'll push back at all times. Like you gave the example that somebody who's angry at their children and therefore they expect them to apologize or they'll never talk to them again. Like that would be somebody that's narcissistic, or that would be somebody that just cannot have Vatranus at all, not willing to have Vatranus.
Well, in my mind, that's the same thing. That's narcissistic. You know, the thing is, there's no point in giving feedback to someone who's going to throw it back at you and become more destructive. You know, you can only really negotiate or give feedback in a relationship where the other person truly wants shalom and they want the relationship. If their goal is just to win and to lord over everybody else, then I'm afraid the only strategy is really avoidance. You know, to minimize.
You can't avoid everybody in your life, right? These are some people, these are relationships in your life. I do think that much better than not ever talking to them or avoiding them would be to have some sort of a level of shalom.
Right. So one of the most profound pieces of advice I've ever heard, and it gets more profound the more I use it in my practice every day virtually, came from Rabbi Beryl Wine, and it had nothing to do with psychology. But he said, to be a good community rabbi, you have to be a little bit blind and a little bit deaf and a little bit stupid. And, you know, if you think about it, that is the most profound advice for living in a family, because it basically means just let things go over your head. Don't be vigilant. You know, don't be so medactic and you know, but you know, like my grandmother, who actually it's her yahrzeit tonight. I used to say to her, Granny, why don't you turn on your hearing aid? And she'd say, I hear what I need to hear, you know. And so I think that is the best way when you've got family and friends. You know, actually Maggie Smith, you know, who just passed away. So one of her lines was in Downton Abbey, was someone asked her how you avoid the people you don't like. She said, that's not such a problem for me. It's how you avoid the, you know, the people close to you. That's the real challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think to not, the issue is to not get hooked. You know, the issue to let go over your head. That is the way they are. They're never going to be different. You know, why keep complaining to yourself about the same thing that's never going to change? But just accept that that's the way it is, you know. And I think also, it's something that I've learned with some family members. Sometimes you do want to have a relationship with them, but you just understand that it will be on their terms. If you want the relationship, it'll be on their terms. It doesn't mean that anything necessarily that's going to compromise you, but it might be that, you know, that they're more concerned about themselves than they are about you, but you enjoy them and you accept them and you want to have the relationship. So you just live with it. You know, that's also being a Vata. Can't expect everybody to be the way you want them to be, you know?
Right. Okay. But you're being very kind. This is like a relationship that I feel I need to keep because I think that's the right thing to do. There's not much of a benefit.
Right.
It's just, it's always like, I do have to set boundaries because I'm not alone. I have a husband, I have children, I need to protect them.
Right. And
So I do need to push back.
Yeah, one has to weigh these things up. But then the issue is boundaries. One's got to set appropriate boundaries. And it's what I said earlier about
Correct.
making sure that you're being equally kind and compassionate to yourself as you are to them.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. By the way, you know, all good midas at their core are expressions of love. Shalom is love. And the essence of Hashem is love. So everything we do to get close to Hashem and to be the embodiment of Hashem's midos is love.
Marjorie has a question.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, sure.
Hi, Tilana. This was mesmerizing. I'm definitely going to listen again. Thank you so much. Beautiful answers, beautiful ideas. So my question is, especially going into Yantif, sometimes we see our children, let's say, be mechanic their children in a way that that goes against the way we would normally do it. We see, I have children that we're talking about adult children that are hurting themselves, are making bad decisions. Or like I said, with chinuch, hurting what we view as hurting our grandchildren in ways we wouldn't want. Sometimes we see this, and so I know my place is that I can't do anything. I 100% surrender to Hashem, to the relationship. Nothing for me to do. They're adults. My question is, in the moment when I get that inner fight or flight, and I'm all triggered, but it's Yantif and I'm at a Thuda and I have to be kind and calm. any strategies for working on my inner self of dealing with these difficult situations where we see people hurting themselves or others in ways that are painful for us to see?
Okay, so there's another aspect to this discussion. By the way, I'm working on a book, and I've got a chapter on Vatranus, and to my absolute horror, the chapter grew to about 220 pages. So an aspect that I haven't brought in, obviously, is the aspect of grief. And, you know, I think, well, I can certainly relate to what you're talking about personally. And you know, when I'm in that situation, I remind myself that this is not my journey. That I brought up my children, and now it's their turn to bring up their children. And you know, if you know that someone's looking for guidance or feedback, or they approach you, or you know that it's going to be well received, but that's not usually the case. But then, you know, there's a sense of loss, because, and it doesn't have to even be something that severe, you know, can be even small things. But when you can see things that you know very clearly are a mistake, and they're going to have later repercussions, and you're powerless to do anything about it, there is grief involved. And so part of the chapter on Vatranus is actually on grief and mourning. Because, you know, a very, very powerful little prayer is the prayer that they use in Alcoholics Anonymous. God, give me the courage to change the things I can, to accept the things I can't, and the serenity to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And you know, the serenity to accept the things you can't change comes with grief. And I think that part of maturing is learning to accept our imperfect control in life. That, you know, as we get older, I think we realize more and more how little we control. And that's particularly painful, as you're saying, when you see things that could sometimes very easily be fixed, but it's just not your place to do it, you know. And certainly, I mean, when it comes to in-law children, and especially daughters-in-law for mothers-in-law, you know, I think that all you can really do, besides davening, which I think is really important, obviously, is to just give them kavod and akaros hatov and money, you know, if you're able, and that's about the extent of it, you know. And that's imperfect control.
Thank you so much. Beautiful answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, I have a question. First, I have a comment. Two comments. I think your presentation is wonderful. I'd like to hear and see what you've written or maybe spoken on. Is there a way to make contact with you?
Yes. Well, I have a website, and you can email me through the website, and you can always get hold of me through Esther.
Your email is?
It's I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I have a comment. I've done a lot of work on myself after receiving, I'll put it this way, a chronic illness 30 years ago, and I'm living with it. And I'm wondering whether it's a chronic illness or a physical accident, and it upside downs your life and your normal way of pursuing your life's wishes. Is there a recommendation or two, or a book or tape to keep regrouping?
I'm sure there are many books, but I think none that come to mind offhand. But I think the issue here is that the issue of grief is an ongoing thing, because when one has an ongoing progressive, or even if the condition's not progressing, the effects and the implications for your life keep changing and progressing. And so it's not something that you can come to terms with just once and then it's finished. There are always going to be permutations and new challenges and new realizations about how it affects you that need to be processed. But I think my general approach is that the challenge when struggling with something like a chronic illness is to try and embrace life more proactively, and to create an ecology that supports well-being, that supports health, even though it's challenging, which means not allowing the illness to become like a focal point, to become the dominant theme of your narrative or of your perspective on yourself or your life, but to make it as part of your life, but expand your picture of your life beyond the illness and the effects of the illness, which I know is very challenging and easier said than done, but I think that is the work.
Thank you. I love hearing at least one part which takes away my all or nothing perspective that it should have been done, and you telling me that it's possibly ongoing. And
I'm just saying, in the event, the thing is that you see, what I didn't talk about, which is another aspect of this, is that every step of life involves loss, and aging is so many losses. Empty nest. I mean, one can name all the losses that we have to go through in life, and it's really about acknowledging those losses and grieving them that allows us to take back whatever was invested in that previous reality and invest that energy into the future. Because when you get stuck and dwell and invest on what doesn't exist, what you can't control, what isn't possible, what never happened, all of that emotional and physical and spiritual and intellectual energy is being invested in unreality. And that takes away the potential, that detracts from the potential to invest all that energy into creating something good and beneficial, that would give you a sense of well-being.
Thank you so much.
The people with raised hands, you're welcome to. Okay, Marjorie. I can't hear. Your microphone's too low. Now you're muted. Now you're unmuted. But go to your audio settings and look for microphone settings and just raise the volume.
I would just follow you. My question kind of follows up on your last discussion. Aging can involve a lot of losses, and especially when aging is combined with, increased disability or long-term disability. But isn't it so that the aging process is also an opportunity to develop these positive things, that as you age, you can, with the grace of Hashem and some work, you can see things.
Absolutely. And what I'm saying is that by grieving, and processing the loss, you then free yourself to focus on what is possible, what is available, and that's where the growth comes in. And it's actually dwelling on what doesn't exist, or what, you know, what your imagination tells you should have existed. That's the Yetzer Hara. That's what gets in the way of you putting your potential into the world.
That even as you age, you can continue to put your potential into the world.
Well, especially because you've had a whole lifetime of experience and gaining wisdom, and as you age, you have more and more to contribute to the world and more richness. And I think that you know, you might not have the power in other areas, but it's actually by virtue of the fact that we don't have power in those other areas that we gain wisdom, because it's actually the decline of the physical that allows us to grow spiritually and mentally, because we're no longer distracted or preoccupied or absorbed by physical, you know, issues.
Thank you.
You know, and I think, you know, what I'm finding is, and I think it's also got to do with, you know, experiences and losses and everything we go through, that there's so many things that one cares about less, you know, that are just so unimportant. And that in itself is very freeing, and allows one to think about life much more clearly and realistically.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Carr. It kind of follows on from my previous question. Your presentation so much gives us the value system. How do we, but then the question and answer helps us integrate it, but how do we actually not do the spiritual bypass of just knowing, well, this is MS, and actually do the work?
Well, the thing is to not, I mean, spiritually bypass is like what a lot of people do. And that's when you actually not being honest with yourself, because these things are a process, and we are physical beings. We are not just, you know, seichel, the Maharal says seichel is bilti gashmi. You can, you know, in your mind, in your imagination, you can live on Mars. But our bodies and our emotions are much slower than our seichel. And they're much less adaptive than our seichel. And so to make these things a reality, one has to be honest with oneself emotionally and intellectually, and be willing to process the feelings, you know, not just use lovely ideas to lull one into, you know, like a drug, into just feeling good and pretending.
Okay, thank you.
Marjorie, you're muted now. Let's see if I can. Okay, any other questions? It's just as well we moved this from Monday, because if it was Monday, we would have had to end on the hour, but this has given us time to have extra time, which I've also appreciated.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, this is good. Owning the things we just. So the thing is that I don't know who said this, because it's our phone, but the reality is
Dr. Carr, Marjorie messaged me and she said she's having a problem with her computer right now, so she's sorry, but I'm going to ask her to tell me what her question was, okay?
Sure, with pleasure. So I'm just going to answer this in the chat, because it's really important, and that is that one has to realize that everything you think and say is about you and not what you're commenting on. And so other people are really just mirrors of oneself. And so when you're running a commentary in your mind about someone else, when you're complaining to yourself or judging or whatever it is, you've got to say to yourself, well, this is me I'm talking about. You know, just like when you're commenting on a painting, everyone's going to have a different comment on the painting because they're not talking about the painting. They're talking about themselves. And so this, you know, I think that if you start by looking at what this is about you and how this is a reflection of your own reality, you avoid the trap of projecting your own issues onto someone else and losing the opportunity to develop and grow from whatever you lack because you think that the lack is in the other person, you know. And then Joy asked about perfectionism. So I think that perfectionism really comes from believing that you're not enough or you're not good enough. And really, one has to work on that by developing a more compassionate, loving approach to oneself. And to also see yourself the way Hashem sees you, which is a work in progress. You're not meant to be perfect. You're not meant to be an angel. You're meant to be engaged in the process of working on yourself. And I think that that's what tshuva is. I think that tshuva is being on the path. It's being engaged in the process. It's not arriving at a point of perfection. Because if you arrive at a point of perfection, what's the point of life?
How does one help others understand that when they expect from them the perfection, the expectation of always doing the right thing? It's when you accept it upon yourself, it's one thing, but when others expect it from you, makes it very complicated to reach those expectations, and in a lot of ways kind of debunks what you say to yourself as being, we're in the process of being a better me.
Well, the thing is, in what way is it anyone else's prerogative to decide what you need to be or what would be a better you?
Exactly, but to explain that to them or to project it to them in a way that they should, or they can try to see that, like, I think a major part is benefit of the doubt and asking and being curious instead of expecting what you had in your mind from the other person.
Right. Well, the thing is, you know, if you consider how difficult it is for us to change ourselves, it should be pretty obvious that changing anybody else is virtually impossible, you know.
Exactly. That's others as well. I'm also a clinical social worker, so that's what I say. Ask yourself how difficult it is to change you. How more so to change somebody else.
Right. And so I think that, you know, I think part of this process that we're talking about is really developing menuchas hanefesh. You know, menuchas hanefesh is equanimity. And you know, Winston Churchill said that if you have to throw a stone at every dog that barks at you, you'll never reach your destination. And basically, we have to choose what to respond to in life, you know, what to take on, and what is actually not our problem or our business, you know, including other people's demands or expectations of us.
Yes, that's it. Right here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Carr, can I ask Marjorie's question now?
Sure.
She's in touch with me. Okay,
Sure.
okay, this is not my question. This is all from Marjorie. She said, may your granny have an Elias Neshama. I think she really appreciated her advice.
Right.
And then the question is, how do we find a healthy balance between feeding our ego and / our access to asceticism?
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's probably the same issue. Because, asceticism is also pride. And I think for one thing, one has to start with being honest with oneself about the fact that we are human beings, we are imperfect, we are all in the process of just trying to do the best we can. And I would say that the more compassionate and loving you are in your approach to yourself, the more honest you will be with yourself. When people are hard on themselves, critical and judgmental, which is actually never coming from them, it's never the person's own voice in their head that's making them critical and judgmental, someone else's voice, usually a parent. But when you are too critical and judgmental of yourself, when your demands on yourself are too high, it becomes so onerous on you that you start being dishonest with yourself. You start rebelling against yourself. You start denying who you really are. And when you're loving and compassionate towards yourself, and when you embrace your imperfections and your faults, the way a loving, wise, mature parent responds to a child, then you're able to be honest with yourself. And then, because you know, in being honest with yourself, that you're not going to turn on yourself or hate yourself or beat yourself up. And so the key is really to develop a loving, compassionate, supportive, holding relationship with yourself. And then to see your shortcomings as the raw material that you need to process to become a better person. Your shortcomings are where the greatest potential for growth is. You can't grow in what you're already good at. I think that's maybe part of the explanation for why, that where a Baal Tshuva is a tzaddik can't reach. So it's in your imperfections and your faults and the things that you struggle with. That's where the tremendous potential for growth is. But you can only grow in those areas if you treat them in a loving, supportive way.
Okay, so when she was kind of in touch with me as you were explaining your answer, and she wanted to know more about, are you talking about specifically materialism? Like that's what she was referring to, like being a more materialistic person versus, and feeding your ego with that, as opposed, like, how do you get a healthy balance so that you have what you need, but you're not overly, I guess, indulgent in, like,
Okay, so I think the issue is really that you cannot take something from outside of you and make it part of you. You can't complete yourself with anything from the outside. And that's why materialism has no end virtually to, how big it can grow. And so actually, the more you're able to forego and to be honest with yourself about whether you really need something and whether it's really going to serve you, or whether you're just caught in the illusion, that the short-term high of acquiring something is going to be good for you. And the more you're able to forego and to say, I don't need this, the more you're reinforcing your own malchus, your own sovereignty. I brought my kids up not to take free gifts, not to go to hotels and take the pamphlets and the brochures and the little sticks that they mix drinks with and all of that. Because every time you take a freebie, or you take something you don't need. Besides the fact that someone paid for it, it's not free, someone's paying for it. Besides that, you're reinforcing your hisaron. You're reinforcing that you need something to feel good. And the more you're able to say no to the desire, the acquisition of material things, the more you're reinforcing your self-sufficiency, your own wholeness.
Oh, that's amazing. Now there's another woman who had a problem getting on, and I'm not sure if Melissa wants to ask and Razy, because they were waiting, but you can maybe do Melissa and Razy first, and then I'll ask you this question.
Okay. Wait.
Melissa, did you want to? You had your hand up. Did you want to ask?
Yes, thank you. I would love to be able to ask. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
So I had a question, but I first just wanted to say an alternate version of the serenity prayer that someone told me a long time ago, which was, God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the people I can, and the wisdom to know that that people is me. So
that's right. Right, exactly.
So that's it. It's me. And one of the questions I have, thank you for this beautiful, beautiful share, is I've often struggled with the idea, and maybe you could help suggest a mindset, perhaps, of when I'm feeling, angry or disappointed or frustrated, or I have a judgmental thought about somebody else, that is lack of amuna. And it's maybe that internalized other critical voice that you were suggesting, but that the initial feelings are, a negative feeling is a lack of amuna. If I really had amuna and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I trusted the process, and I knew that everything was for my good and for the good of the world, that I wouldn't have an uncomfortable or a negative emotional experience. So I'm wondering what you would think of that.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And really, the more, as I said, all machlokas comes from excessive devotion to self. And so whenever one is all negative emotions, complaining, dissatisfaction, judgment, criticism, condemnation, all of that comes from focusing on what your imagination is telling you should be the reality. And that is really going against, or rebelling in a way, against the actual reality, which is Hashem's reality. It's wanting life on your terms. It's, people who complain, and very often big complainers will tell you that they have low self-esteem, but actually complaining comes from gaiva. Complaining comes from being angry or upset or disappointed, or all of those things, at the fact that life doesn't happen on your terms, that reality isn't what you expect or demand reality should be.
So how do we understand those human emotions in light of Emunah and Bitachon?
Well, the thing is that in a situation where you're experiencing those emotions, you can dan lekav zchus, you can have more compassion, you can have more chesed, more tolerance, more patience. Those situations are an invitation to develop the midas that will allow you to live with other people's foibles and shortcomings with equanimity, and not be constantly protesting and having a sort of negative commentary on life because it isn't the way you think it should be. And also to realize, and I firmly believe this, and I've been a psychotherapist for nearly 40 years, I really believe that, except for people that are really evil, obviously, the majority of people are doing the best they can with what they've got. And nobody wants to have a miserable life. Nobody wants to make other people miserable. People do what they're able to do. And in fact, the more loving and compassionate and tolerant and affirming you're able to be, the more you're actually empowering them to change. And the more you take an exacting, judgmental, critical attitude towards them, the more you're recreating the very wound that made them like that in the first place. And so you're just digging them deeper into their stuckness. If you want to be an agent for other people's change, you have to be a loving, compassionate, accepting person. You've got to look at them the way that Hashem looks at them, as a work in progress, and to give them encouragement and support and love. That's our job.
And towards ourselves as well.
Absolutely. It starts with ourselves. You can't do it for others if you're unable to do it for yourself.
Not letting ourselves off the hook for working on ourselves if we're too self-compassionate.
Well, I mean, too self-compassionate sounds like, and letting yourself off the hook sounds irresponsible. Yeah. I'm talking about being compassionate with oneself in order that you can be scrupulously honest with yourself without fear of your own judgment or criticism. And by being honest with yourself, you can really work on what needs to be worked on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Razy, do you want to ask now? You had your hand up for a long time.
Yes, I'll ask my question. You hear me?
I do.
We hear you.
Okay. So you were talking about, a person doesn't feel that they have such, value. And let's say if you have a child who doesn't feel so valued, and you were saying that before, very often comes from critical messages that they're hearing. It very often comes from a parent. How do you help that child if they're up to that place?
Sonia, I have lunch for you. You're welcome.
Can everybody else please mute if you're not asking the questions, because it's disrupting the flow of everything. Please just mute yourself. Everybody, make sure you're muted.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
We talked about the child doesn't feel obviously
right.
Because it's displaying as a lot of perfectionism, trying to be so perfectly, not being very unsure of oneself, and constantly needing reassurance.
Wow!
Esther, did you bring us some cake?
Oh, there was so much cake there. It was unbelievable. Wow, I can't believe it's still going on. It's amazing.
So I think this is a really important question. And that is,
I'm listening.
This is something else that I've written extensively about, and I've called this being an appreciative witness. And the thing is that one can never underestimate the power of even a kind gesture or a kind word, let alone if you have the power in someone's life to give them an experience of themselves that they aren't generally getting, let's say at school or from their parents or whatever it is, to be that one person that sees in them the value and the qualities that maybe nobody else sees. And to let them know you see those qualities, to give them that validation, and if possible, to even give them experiences where they can show those qualities, experience those qualities, get validation for those qualities. Being that witness can change someone's life, because if everybody else is giving someone devaluing or negative messages, that becomes their whole reality. But if one person gives an alternative message, and that's especially if it's someone, for example, in a family or a teacher, that alternative message will create a dissonance, and that dissonance can change the person's life. Because one day they can build their whole sense of self from that message. So if everyone says to you, you're worthless, but one person says, I see this amazing quality in you, you can create a career or a whole way of being out of that quality. And this can literally save a person's life, because especially if you're someone with power or someone who the person admires or respects, and they can say to themselves, well, maybe nobody else loved me, but if that person loved me, I must be lovable, I must have worth. And so one can never underestimate the power of being a witness. And I'll take this even further. This even applies to momentary meetings in shops, on public transport, being kind and warm to people. You never know what effect that can have. You know, I remember I was once walking with a cousin in London, and I was giving him a musa drosha. So I was trying to make the walk as long as possible on a Shabbos afternoon. And I kept saying good Shabbos to people, and people were at best grunting at me, at worst just totally ignoring me. And he said to me, look, people here just don't wish each other good Shabbos. So I said, well, look, it's very difficult for me to walk past people and not wish them good Shabbos. Anyway, at some point, a guy started walking towards us, and his shoulders were bent, and he looked so downtrodden. He looked like he didn't even know he existed. And I said a very warm, energetic good Shabbos to him, and he literally straightened up, and his shoulders went back, and a big smile on his face, and he beamed, and he strode off. And I said to my cousin, that's why you say good Shabbos, you know? It's really acknowledging the Tselem Elokim in another person. And when you do that, you literally expand them. You know, we talk about swelling with pride. And we talk about, you know, I was so embarrassed I could have died. You know, when someone feels humiliated, when someone feels demeaned, they literally feel like death. You know, the word mortified has, you know, the French for death in it. And we know this obviously from Yehuda and Tamar. And so I'm laboring the point, but basically, especially with children, one has to make a child feel enjoyed. One has to make a child feel that their presence is welcome, that they have the power to affect your mood and to affect your happiness when they walk into a room or when you see them. And that really can build a person. One doesn't have to do anything sophisticated other than being genuinely warm and loving.
Thank you. I hear that. I hear that.
Okay, so we have a few more hands up, but Yehuda's question is, I think when you were talking about Vatranus, she had this question: does one have to work on their anivas, their humility, before becoming a Vatran, or do they go together?
They go absolutely together. In fact, everything I spoke about goes together. The more you work on anova, the more you'll be able to be mavater, and the more you're mavater, the more you're, you know, become an anov. And I think that this is a general principle in working on one's midas. You can either work from the inside out or the outside in, but they're both important.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so let's see, Michal, you had your hand up again. You want to ask?
Yes. So, yes. So there's probably a lot of therapists in this. I know Esther has a lot of students who are therapists, including myself. So if we're working, let's say, with a woman whose husband does really is disrespectful to her, he like says not nice things, is it okay to bring it to her awareness what's happening? Because I found when I have brought it awareness, like at first I used to tiptoe more, but sometimes when I bring awareness, well, did you notice that? Like the woman does become empowered, but it seems to be the opposite of what you're saying. Like be almost like you said, like be a little stupid, be a little deaf. But I find like then the woman gets squashed and she doesn't even know it.
Well, first of all, I promise you, as a therapist, I'm not a little bit deaf, blind, or stupid. I've got everything going to the max. I was talking about applying that in a family situation where if I had my therapist's eyes and ears on in my family, I'd probably explode. Do you know what I mean? Or implode. Because families, families are families. But I think the question you've asked is a very, very layered and complicated question. Because the consequences of facing a reality like that can be dire. And so when you push someone to face something that they're not ready to face, you can do real emotional harm.
For sure, 100%. But I'm saying if you've worked for the lady, let's say for 2 years already, and you feel like, she's ready, and you see like she blossoms from it, and like,
absolutely,
I'm on board with this.
No, but then what you're talking about is not pointing it out to her. What you're talking about is validating her experience and giving her permission to actually call a spade, to name, what her husband is doing, number one, and number two, that it doesn't work for her, that that it's a violation of her, personal integrity, because disrespect, all dehumanizing practices erode a person's spirit. They're very destructive, obviously. And often people become so accustomed to it, especially someone who grew up with abuse, may be habituated to abuse, and maybe has a too high pain tolerance. And so even though they're not registering that they're being abused in some way, the effects are still there. Sometimes being a strong, resilient person can work against you. And so in that case, actually validating the person's experience, it can be very freeing for them and empower them to set appropriate boundaries, obviously.
Wow, this was so powerful, how you just worded all of that. This is like gold, and everything, like you're saying, it's just pure gold. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Esther, your hand's still up.
My hand's up?
Yeah.
Oh, where's my hand? I don't even see that.
Esther Hollander.
Oh, Esther Hollander, sorry.
I was wondering, one of the things, on a personal level, everything you've said is amazing. And I have questions about integrating it in a societal level and our responsibility. And let me share, a couple weeks ago, Parshas Kitetse, I was thinking about as a Balas Tshuva of 35 or so years. What I kept thinking about was we reach a point sometimes where we have to go back into the danger zone, just like, we know so many cases in Tanakh where people, women in particular, had to step out of their role very quickly and go right back and at the right point. And it's hard to balance sneas and anivo. I'm talking about the type of sneas, behavioral, not dress, and anivos and mavater, with trying to say to society, this, we've got to do better, and this is not personal. And I say this as someone who was widowed with very young kids and went through the system as a widow raising orphans, who often had to advocate and say, you've forgotten about something. And it wasn't about me, but it was about, society. There's a responsibility here. And I was just wondering if you had some thoughts.
Well, I think, first of all, you can't be mavater for anybody else. You can only be mavater for yourself. Being mavater for someone else is is anything from irresponsible to cruel. But in that case, you maybe had to be mavatar your own pride or your own anxiety, whatever it is, you know, to advocate for someone else. It takes courage, and that means maybe overriding your own ego to do something that was difficult for you but necessary for someone else. And I think that is what being a Torah Jew is about, you know, standing up for what's right. I keep reminding you know, something that I'm loving about being in the times that we're in, and it's very hard to love being in the times that we're in because it's, you know, obviously I don't have to elaborate on that. It's horrifying. But I love what Menachem Begin said is, you know, that I'm not a Jew with shaking knees. And I think that's a very powerful thing. We're not Jews anymore with shaking knees. It's kind of what you're talking about, you know, and especially when it comes to the rights of children, you know, obviously it's our responsibility to stand up for them. And to stand up against anything that's wrong and in any situation where people are getting hurt. Naomi's hands up. Naomi, you're muted, and your video is also.
Naomi? Okay. Well, Naomi, if you get it together, let us know quickly. Other than that, this was a...
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, she got in the nick of time.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. So I had to step out for a couple of minutes. I'm not sure if I missed if somebody else asked my question, but if a person has a tendency towards perfectionism, be it from low self-esteem or whatever, how do they balance that not being so perfectionistic, but also wanting to be midakdek and mitzvos and doing things exactly, you know, right, the way Hashem wants us to? So how do we hold those two things?
Well, I think that Hashem wants us to be real. And to really bring our authentic self to what we're doing. And often being too medactic or too ambitious is actually a Yetzer Hara. Perfectionism is actually a Yetzer Hara. And if you think about the Yetzer Hara's job as being to get in the way of you fulfilling your potential, basically when a person drives themselves, they're going to either, you know, take shortcuts or avoid or rebel, or they're going to burn out and they'll be good for a while and then they're going to burn out and even possibly go to the other extreme. And so I think one has to be real and honest with oneself in terms of being in the process of getting better and getting better incrementally and in you know, step by step, in successive approximations, like they would say in science. And if you manage to be what you aim to be instantly, you're probably just living life as a performance, and you probably just convinced yourself that you arrived, but you're really just a caricature of goodness and not, you know, not the real deal. I think the real deal is someone who sees themselves in perspective and is equally honest about their challenges and shortcomings as they are about their milers, and treats them both with anova and equanimity, which means that I have to leverage my strengths and my milers to work on my shortcomings. It's about having yourself in perspective. And Perfectionism doesn't allow you to do that.
It's only
Thank you.
2:30. The day is but young.
Steady on my side, but it's okay.
What time is it over there? 8:30?
Yeah, 8:25.
On behalf of everyone, there's 53 people still here. Amazing. Thank you, Dr. Carr, for your enlightening, laser beam, sharp insights and words. I'm getting a lot of text here. Let me tell you what they're telling me. They're saying his words, the way he phrases things, it's unreal. His one-liners, his clarity. I seldom hear someone explain noodles in such short, concise, quick explanations. Amazing. Thank you, everybody. Dr.
Could we get a printout? Could we get a printout from this, what we learned today?
No.
All the questions and answers? Something.
I don't
Esther,
know.
we have to have something.
Somebody can, first of all, I'm going to post the recording on the website.
Oh, okay, that's good. Okay,
Yeah,
so I
they
can do that.
listen to it multiple times, and maybe somebody
Okay.
wants to just do all the questions and answers. I don't know.
Could we
But
share it? Could we share the posting
I'm
with other
putting it
people?
on I'm putting it on the website. Okay. So I would suggest that everyone should go to the website to get it. Okay. It's not going to be
If
down.
someone has great notes that they can type and put on, we would all love it.
That would be amazing.
No, I mean non-Vanishma people. Could we share it with?
Tell them to go to the website and they'll be able to get it there. I
Oh,
want
I
them
thought you have to pay to
see,
get on.
I want them to see the link between everything we learned today and Vanishma. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Carr.
Wow.
Fabulous and amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just beautiful.